A few decades ago, scientists began thinking about something that seemed impossible, building a giant ship capable of taking 10,000 people to another world. This idea changed everything we knew about the future of humanity. What appeared to be just science fiction became a real project, with engineers and researchers working on every detail. This ship would be like a flying city with homes, farms, hospitals and schools, all floating through space for hundreds of years. People would be born, live and die inside this ship, and only the great-grandchildren of the first travellers would reach the final destination. This made scientists ask a mind-blowing question: is humanity ready to leave Earth forever? Get ready to fall asleep while listening to this video. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment what part of the world you're watching from. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Imagine knowing that everything and everyone you have ever loved is doomed. That is not a thought experiment. It is the brutal calculation that starts the Space Ark project, a journey measured not in years but in centuries. Let us talk about why. Why would any civilization, at the peak of its powers or perhaps in its final throes, decide to build a machine of such staggering complexity and send a sliver of itself on a one-way trip into the absolute dark for 1,000 years? The simple answer is survival, but that word is a trap because it makes the idea sound neat, logical, even obvious. It is none of those things. The real motivations are a tangled knot of fear, hope, arrogance, and a very deep, very human stubbornness. This is not about adventure. This is not about curiosity, though that spark is part of it. This is about the last possible move in a game where the board is on fire, so we have to start with the fire. What could be so bad, so utterly inescapable, that building a tin can to sail the void for a millennium seems like the reasonable option? The list is terrifyingly plausible. A planet-killing asteroid is the classic. A cosmic roll of the dice we know will come up Snake Eyes eventually. The difference is we might see it coming decades or even centuries out, providing a cruel countdown. Then there is the spectre we built ourselves. A full-scale nuclear exchange. Not a war, but an extinction, rendering the biosphere poisonous for millennia. Or the slower, more insidious version. An environmental cascade failure we triggered but could not stop. A warming, acidifying, collapsing world that can no longer support a technological civilization. These are the classic existential threats, the ones that make the news, but the motivation could be subtler. It could be a viral pandemic engineered or natural that has a 99.99% fatality rate, leaving pockets of survivors but shattering the global network of knowledge and supply chains beyond repair, dooming the species to a long, slow fade. It could be the rise of a truly global, unstoppable totalitarian system, one so pervasive that the only concept of freedom left is literal escape velocity. The key is the asterisk inescapability asterisk. The problem must be planetary, and the solution must be to get off the planet. Not to a nearby moon or Mars, because those are just other deserts in the same burning house. You have to leave the solar system entirely. That is the scale of the response. It is an admission of total defeat on the home front. Now, here is where the ethics kick in, and they are brutal. The resources needed for a generational starship are astronomical, pun intended. We are talking about diverting the productive capacity of entire nations for generations. The metals, the energy, the intellectual capital, the literal sweat and blood of millions of people, all poured into a single vessel holding maybe 10,000 souls. Meanwhile, back on the burning Earth, billions are suffering through the very catastrophe you're fleeing. The moral question screams at you: are you building a lifeboat, or are you stealing the last remaining materials to build a private yacht for the elite while the ship sinks? This is the Planet B versus Planet A argument. Critics would say every gram of material, every brilliant mind, every watt of power spent on the Ark is a betrayal of those left behind. It is resources not spent on geoengineering, on disaster relief, on building arks of a different kind. Bunkers, preserves, last-ditch efforts to salvage a future on Earth. Proponents, the Ark builders, would argue a grim but pragmatic point. Some wounds are fatal. You cannot negotiate with an asteroid. You cannot reason with the runaway greenhouse effect. At a certain point, triage is not cruel. It is the only remaining act of responsibility. The Ark, then, is not an alternative to saving Earth. It is what you do when Earth is asterisk already lost asterisk. It is the acceptance of a species-level amputation to save a fragment of the whole. But let us be honest, the motivation might not be purely reactive. It might not be about running asterisk from asterisk something, but asterisk towards asterisk something. That is the other side of the coin, the exploratory imperative. It is the same drive that sent Polynesian voyagers across the Pacific in outrigger canoes, the same drive that pushed humans into every ecological niche on Earth. It is the belief, deep in our bones, that frontiers are meant to be crossed. In this framing, the catastrophe is not an immediate threat, but an inevitable one. The sun itself will die in billions of years, but long before that, it will make Earth uninhabitable. So why wait for a specific disaster? Why not, in a moment of relative peace and prosperity, use that stability to ensure the ultimate longevity of the human story? This is the philosophy of existential resilience. A single planet species is a doomed species. Putting all your eggs in one basket is, on a long enough timeline, a recipe for oblivion. Therefore, dispersing is not an act of despair, but the ultimate act of optimism and prudence. It is saying the human project is worth continuing no matter what. This motivation is cleaner, less fraught with immediate guilt, but perhaps even more ambitious. It requires a civilization not on the brink, but at its height, to make a sacrifice for a future it will never see, for people who will be as alien to them as we are to medieval peasants. Which brings us to legacy. What kind of legacy does building an ark leave? Is it a monument to our technological hubris, a pyramid so vast it sails among the stars? Or is it an act of pure, almost irrational hope? Think of the medieval craftsmen working on a cathedral they knew they would never see completed. They laid stones for a heaven their grandchildren might worship in. The ark builders are laying hull plates for a world their grandchildren will be born into, a world that is all they will ever know. The legacy is not a static monument, but a living, breathing continuation. It is a message in a bottle, but the message is not a note. It is the entire culture, the language, the knowledge, the DNA. It says, we were here, we mattered enough to try to send this part of us forward. There is a profound loneliness in that act, but also a defiant courage. Finally, we have to confront the psychology of the people who make the decision. It is not a spreadsheet decision. The data might show the probability of an extinction event in the next 10,000 years is 95%. But humans are not good at 10,000 years. We struggle with planning for next quarter. So the decision makers, the ones who greenlight this century-spanning project, are engaging in an almost mythological act of will. They're connecting their identity to a chain of generations they cannot imagine. They're betting their reputation, their resources, their place in history, on the faith that their great-great-great-grandchildren will still care about the mission, will still maintain the machines, will still teach the stories. That is an insane gamble. It requires a culture that has somehow overcome the short-termism that defines our current world. Perhaps that very cultural shift is the first and most important step in building the Ark. You do not just build a ship, you build a society that can think in centuries. So why risk everything on a millennial journey? Because the alternative is risking everything on a single, fragile, beautiful rock. Because the universe is indifferent, and we are not. Because even if the chance of success is vanishingly small, 0% is zero. The Ark is the physical manifestation of a bet against nothingness. It is the argument that life, aware of its own fragility, has a right to try to endure. It is not a pretty answer. It is not a happy one. It is born from scenarios of utter horror, or from a cold, clear-eyed assessment of cosmic reality. It is the most extreme project a civilization can undertake, and the fact that we can even conceive of it tells us something terrible and wonderful about ourselves. We are the species that looks at the abyss and starts drawing blueprints for a bridge, even if it will take 1,000 years to build, and even if we will never set foot on it. The justification for the Ark is everything that comes next. The engineering, the society, the heartbreak, the hope. It is the first and most difficult stone laid in the cathedral of the void. This decision sets the tone for every single challenge that follows, from the air we breathe to the gods we pray to. It is the why that must be answered before a single piece of metal is forged, because that answer has to echo in the hollows of the ship for generations, long after the people who gave it are dust. It is the story they will tell the children born in the metal halls, under the artificial sun. It is the reason they are there and not somewhere else. It is the foundational myth, and whether it is a myth of escape or a myth of destiny will shape every aspect of the journey. That is the weight of the imperative. It is not a topic for a committee meeting, it is the last, best argument for our existence, forged in steel and cast into the night. High-yield grains and vegetables, obviously, but also nitrogen, fixing plants to enrich soil, fast-growing trees for air recycling, and perhaps limited wood, medicinal plants. What about animals? You will need pollinators, so bees or similar insects are non-negotiable, but larger animals, chickens for eggs and meat, might be efficient. Fish in aquaculture tanks provide protein and help cycle nutrients, but a cow, impossible. The resource cost is absurd. So the diet will be largely, though not completely, vegetarian. Then there are the psychological animals, pets. A dog or a cat consumes resources, but the morale boost might be incalculable. Perhaps only a few, strictly regulated. The horror scenario is a blight. A fungus or a bacterium that attacks your primary starch crop could wipe it out in a season. On Earth, you have other regions, other strains to fall back on. In the Ark, you are your own continent. So you need seed banks, multiple isolated growing chambers, and a deep, deep understanding of plant pathology. You're not just farming, you're curating the only garden in existence. All these systems, structural, atmospheric, hydrological, nutritional, energetic, are interlocked in a feedback loop of insane complexity. A slight increase in average temperature from the reactors might change the humidity, which affects plant transpiration rates, which alters the oxygen production, which requires the algae vats to adjust their output, which changes the nutrient load in the water cycling system. It is a constant real-time puzzle for the Ark's governing AI and its human overseers. This is the ultimate irony of the Space Ark. It is conceived as an escape from a dying Earth, a testament to our technological prowess to build a world. But in doing so, it forces us to confront in the most direct way possible our absolute dependence on the biological world we evolved in. We spend billions and millennia of brainpower to meticulously recreate, in a fragile and artificial shell, the very processes that on Earth are free, robust, and taken for granted. A breath of fresh air, a drink of water, the growth of a plant. The Ark is not a rejection of nature. It is the ultimate homage to it, a desperate attempt to bottle its magic because we have lost the original. It is the most complex machine ever conceived, but its success is measured not in speed or power, but in its ability to mimic a planet. Every bolt, every line of code, every wheat stalk is there for one purpose: to keep a tiny, fragile bubble of life ticking over in the silent night, a heartbeat against the infinite. The engineers and biologists who design it are not just technicians, they are midwives to a new kind of existence, where humanity is no longer a passenger on a world, but the trembling custodian of the only one it has left. So we have built our closed world, a masterpiece of engineering that mimics a planet. But a world is not just air and water and crops, it is people, and 10,000 people locked in a metal can for generations, with no exit, no outside, and a mission that outlasts their lives, is not a society, it is a pressure cooker. The most brilliant engineering means nothing if the social structure fractures. This is the next great challenge. How do you govern? How do you live together, when every argument, every grievance, every power struggle happens inside the only lifeboat in existence? There is no wilderness to flee to, no other country to emigrate to. Your neighbour is not just someone you dislike. They're someone who, if pushed too far, could sabotage the air filtration system you both breathe from. So, from day one, the social contract is not a philosophical idea. It is a literal survival manual. The first and most daunting question is the form of government. What works for a millennium-long journey? A democracy like we're used to? Maybe. But democracy thrives on debate, on change, on the peaceful transfer of power. In an environment where stability is paramount, where a single misguided popular vote could redirect resources away from vital infrastructure for a generation, is the will of the people always the wisest course? There is a terrifying argument for a technocratic meritocracy, a council of the smartest engineers, biologists, and systems analysts making all the big decisions. They would understand the ship's needs at a granular level, but that slides easily into a benevolent dictatorship of the experts. What happens when the experts disagree? What happens when they become an entrenched ruling class, hoarding knowledge and privilege for their children? Then there is the opposite model, a hyper-participatory democracy. where every citizen has a direct say in every major decision through constant digital referendums. This could foster immense buy-in, but it could also lead to decision paralysis or the tyranny of the majority over vulnerable minorities. In reality, the government will likely be a strange hybrid, a layered system. There might be an elected council for social and cultural matters, but a separate appointed technical authority, like a ship's captain and chief engineer rolled into a permanent institution, with veto power over anything that threatens the vessel's physical integrity. This creates its own tension. Who watches the watchers? How do you prevent the technical authority from becoming a shadow government? The answer lies in the second pillar, the law. You cannot use Earth's legal codes. They are built for continents, for escape valves like prisons or exile. On the Ark, prison is a nightmare. You still have to feed and house the offender, and they become a permanent drain. Capital punishment is possibly even more unthinkable. You are murdering a precious, irreplaceable genetic and social asset. So you need a new legal foundation, the Constitution of the Ark. This document would be the most carefully written text in history. Its primary goal is not justice in the abstract, but mission preservation. It must be rigid on core, non-negotiable principles. Sabotage of life support is the ultimate crime. Mandatory population controls are accepted. Everyone must work for the common good. But it also must have a built-in mechanism for slow, careful evolution over centuries, because the society of year 300 will have different needs than the society of year 1. Perhaps every generation gets to propose amendments, but they require supermajorities and review by both the popular council and the technical authority to pass. The law would focus heavily on restitution and rehabilitation, not punishment. If you damage a farm module, your sentence is to work double shifts repairing it and learning botany. Social conflict would be mediated swiftly and publicly because grudges cannot fester. This leads to the third issue, social stratification. Even if you start with the idealistic "we are all in this together" ethos, classes will form. They will be based on function. The engineers who understand the fusion reactor and the quantum computers will have a kind of priestly untouchable status. The farmers who grow the food are equally vital, but their knowledge might be seen as more mundane. Then there are teachers, medics, caretakers, artists, sanitation workers. In a closed system, every job is essential, but will they be valued equally? Probably not. Status might accrue to those whose work is most mysterious or directly linked to survival. The reactor engineers live with the constant pressure of keeping the lights on. The farmers live with the constant pressure of preventing famine. This could create a tense but respectful balance. Or it could create a resentful underclass if perks and living space are unevenly distributed. You cannot have massive wealth inequality because there is no wealth, only resource allocation. But you can have privilege, better quarters, more personal space, first access to rare cultural or recreational items. Preventing this from becoming a hereditary caste system is crucial. Perhaps all children are educated together and assigned roles through a combination of aptitude testing and personal choice, with some essential jobs requiring mandatory service rotations. But what if no one wants asterisk to be a waste processing technician? Do you assign it randomly? Do you make it a prestigious, highly rewarded duty? The social engineering is as delicate as the environmental engineering. Then there is the glue that holds it all together. Shared purpose. The first generation, the founders, they saw Earth die. They feel the mission in their bones. Their children will hear the stories as vivid family history. But by the fifth generation, the mission is a legend. Earth is a blurry video, a myth. The destination planet is a hypothetical promise they will never live to see. They were born in the metal halls, they will die in the metal halls. So why should they care about a goal set centuries ago by ancestors they never knew? How do you maintain cohesion when you are living in the boring, tedious middle of the journey, the long now? Culture becomes the essential tool. The mission must be woven into everything, religion, art, daily ritual. The anniversary of the launch is the most important holiday. The names of the founders are sacred. The ship itself might be personified, revered, or loved as a living entity. Education will constantly reinforce the fragility of their world and the nobility of their custodianship. But there is a danger here too. A stagnant, totalitarian culture that stifles any question. What happens when a teenager asks, "Why are we doing this? Why don't we just find a nice spot and park?" That question is existential treason. A healthy society would need to have safe ways to voice that doubt, to redebate the mission's meaning for each new generation, without actually risking a mutiny. It is a razor's edge. Finally, the ultimate tension: individual freedom versus collective survival. On Earth, we take personal liberty for granted. On the Ark, your freedom ends where it threatens the biosphere. You cannot decide to have 6 children, you cannot decide to start an open flame festival in a forestry module. You cannot even decide to quit your job and wander. There is nowhere to wander asterisk to asterisk. Your life path, your career, your relationships, even your diet are all more regulated than in any society in human history. The system, by necessity, must value conformity and stability above all else. So how do you nurture creativity, innovation, and the human spirit under such constraints? You must deliberately build valves for expression, virtual reality realms where people can experience wild, impossible landscapes, art forms that use approved, recyclable materials, a rich tradition of storytelling, music and debate that operates within safe boundaries. The greatest societal achievement of the Ark would not be its smooth government, but a culture that manages to feel free even within its profound limits. It would have to master the art of making the necessary field chosen. The social structure of the Ark is, therefore, the most ambitious political experiment ever attempted. It is the attempt to design not just a government, but a human culture that can remain sane, stable and purposeful for longer than the Roman Empire lasted. It must be robust enough to survive internal conflicts, pliable enough to adapt over time, and inspiring enough to give meaning to lives lived entirely in the echoing corridors between the stars. The engineers built the vessel, but it is this society, this fragile, deliberate, and endlessly complex web of laws, norms, and shared stories, that will truly determine whether the Ark is a tomb or a cradle. But all the social engineering in the world, all the perfect laws and balanced hierarchies, mean nothing if the human mind inside that carefully managed society breaks. You can design a utopia in a bottle, but you cannot design away the fundamental human need for horizon, for change, for a sense of purpose that feels personal, not just statistical. This is the silent, insidious enemy of the Ark. Not radiation, not meteoroids, but the psychology of confinement stretched across lifetimes. Let us be brutally honest. The initial launch period will be a time of adrenaline and high purpose. The first generation, the pioneers, will be busy, overwhelmed, and bonded by the shared trauma of leaving Earth and the monumental task of making the Ark work. They will have a clear, visceral purpose. But that fades. After a few decades, the routine sets in. You've never known anything else but the gentle curve of the hull, the constant hum of machinery, the same 10,000 faces. There are no new places to go. You can walk the entire circumference of your world in a day. Every park, every corridor, every viewport is intimately known. The stars outside do not move perceptibly. This is when the cabin fever of a camping trip becomes a permanent condition, a pathology of place. The clinical terms are depression, anxiety, acute sensory deprivation, and behavioural sink. Studies from submarines, Antarctic stations, and even generation ships in science fiction point to the same dangers. Irrational conflicts, apathy, withdrawal from community, and a collapse of motivation. When your entire universe is a known quantity, where every outcome is predictable, the human spirit can wilt. For the first generation, Earth is a memory, a ghost that haunts dreams. For their children, it is a story, a place of mythical proportions they will never verify. And for the generation after that, it is history, as real and yet as distant as ancient Rome is to us. Their entire reality is the Ark. This creates a profound generational divide in perception. The founders are defined by loss and a desperate mission. The middle generations, those born into the long, empty stretch of the voyage, live in the great between. They see neither the origin nor the destination. Their purpose is purely maintenance. Keep the machine running for a future they will never witness. This is an immense psychological burden. Why study hard? Why follow the strict rules? Why not just enjoy the limited pleasures available? The societal answer is for your children's children, but that is an abstract evolutionary motive that runs counter to basic human short-term reward wiring. A society of caretakers for a future they never see risks, becoming a society of automatons, going through the motions without heart, or worse, rebels who reject the sacred mission as a scam perpetrated by the dead. So countermeasures are not a luxury. They're as critical as oxygen scrubbers. The first line of defence is environmental design. The Ark cannot feel like a spaceship forever. It must feel like a world. This means creating illusions. Massive light panels on the ceiling must simulate a full diurnal cycle, complete with changing colour temperatures from dawn to dusk. They might even program a very slow seasonal shift, with slightly longer days or dimmer suns for a winter period, to break the monotony of eternal sameness. Virtual reality will not be a game. It will be a vital public health utility. People will spend scheduled time in immersive pods, experiencing forests, oceans, mountains, and even fantastical landscapes that never existed. This is not escapism. It is sensory therapy, a way to prevent the neural pathways associated with vastness and novelty from atrophying completely. The social calendar will be packed with rituals, festivals, and holidays that have nothing to do with Earth. You will have Rotation Day celebrating the ship's spin, Founders' Remembrance, Ecosystem Balance Day, and Stellar Passage festivals when the ship passes a notable star or nebula. These events create a rhythm, a shared cultural heartbeat that marks the passage of time in a meaningful way. Art and narrative become survival tools. New forms of storytelling will emerge, tales not of Earth's past, but of the ship's own journey, mythologized. The reactors might be personified as benevolent gods that need care. The hydroponic gardens might be the subject of epic poems. Music will be paramount as it requires no physical resources beyond an instrument and can evoke profound emotion. But here lies a deep danger, the potential for cultural pathology. A trauma experienced by one generation, a near catastrophic failure, a violent social conflict, a painful resource rationing, can become encoded in the culture as a myth, a taboo, or a neurosis that persists for centuries. For example, if an early conflict was caused by overpopulation pressure, even after perfect controls are established, the culture might develop a deep irrational fear of children, or a ritualistic shaming of large families. The story of the Great Air Scar, a fictional minor leak, might be told for generations to instill absolute compliance with atmosphere rules, but the fear it breeds could become crippling. The balance is to remember the lessons without being enslaved by the trauma. Then there is the concept of purpose on an individual level. In a society where your job is assigned for the good of the whole, where personal ambition is channeled into strictly useful avenues, how do you find personal meaning? The answer might be in mastery and micro-exploration. You cannot explore new lands, but you can explore the depths of a single field. Becoming the absolute expert on a particular strain of wheat, on the nuances of the water recycling biofilm, on the history of engine maintenance logs, can provide a sense of discovery and achievement. Citizen science projects, analysing the endless streams of data from the ship's sensors or the interstellar medium, could give people a sense of contributing to a grand intellectual project. The goal is to turn the immense, crushing stability of the environment into a canvas for deep internal exploration. The ultimate psychological challenge is the ceiling. On Earth, even if you never travel, you know there are other places. That knowledge itself is a psychological pressure valve. On the Ark there is a literal ceiling. The hull, you can see it, you can touch it. Everything that is inside. The knowledge that this is all there is, forever, could trigger profound existential claustrophobia. Mitigating this might involve deliberate architectural trickery, using mirrors, projections, and open atriums to create illusions of distance, building sections that are deliberately mysterious or rarely visited, to cultivate a sense of unexplored space within the ship itself. Perhaps even sections are kept off limits, designated as wild or mechanical reserve, to feed the human need for the unknown. The mental health of the Ark is a continuous active project, not a passive state. It will require a class of professionals, psychologists, cultural engineers, ritual makers, whose sole job is to monitor the collective mood and innovate new ways to keep hope and engagement alive. They will look for signs of social contagion, depressive trends, and generational drift. Their tools will be story, ritual, environment, and social policy. The success of the mission will hinge as much on their work as on the engineers who maintain the reactor. For a ship can be perfectly sound, its course true, its systems green, and still be a ghost ship drifting with a crew that has quietly, collectively given up on the inside. The mind is the final frontier, and on the Ark it is the only frontier left to explore. Keeping 10,000 minds sane generation after generation in a box under the endless night is perhaps the most heroic and least celebrated aspect of the entire journey. It is the quiet war against despair, fought with light, story, and the relentless, fragile human capacity to find meaning, even when the walls are close enough to touch. That psychological well-being, that fragile mental balance we just talked about, rests on a foundation that is literally biological. You can have the best therapists and the most vibrant festivals, but if your stomach is empty or the air turns thin, none of it matters. So we descend from the realm of the mind to the dirty under our fingernails, to the absolute bedrock of the Ark, the self-contained ecosystem. This is not a garden. It is a life support system disguised as a farm. Every leaf, every microbe, every drop of water is a cog in a machine that must never stop. The primary challenge is staggering. You have to feed 10,000 people every day for centuries, using only what you brought with you and what you can endlessly recycle. There is no resupply. The first concept is the division of the Ark into functional biomes. These are not natural biomes like a rainforest or a desert. They are engineered zones, each with a specific job. The largest will be the agricultural modules. Forget vast fields of waving wheat under an open sky. Space is the ultimate premium. So farming is vertical, intensive, and technologically ruthless. You will see towering racks of plants growing under precise LED lights, their roots not in soil but in a nutrient-rich mist. This is aeroponics, or in a shallow flow of water, hydroponics. These systems use maybe 95% less water than traditional farming and produce yields per square foot that would make an Iowa farmer weep. The crops are chosen for calorie density, nutritional completeness, and growth speed. Staples like potatoes, soybeans, wheat, and rice will be genetically optimized for compact growth and high output. Leafy greens are quick cycle crops that provide vitamins and morale, but it is not just about calories. You need fiber, you need oils, you need variety to prevent dietary fatigue and malnutrition. So you also have smaller modules for specialty crops, fruits like strawberries or tomatoes, herbs, perhaps even coffee or tea plants as critical psychoactive luxuries. Then you have the atmospheric biomes. These are the lungs. While the farms produce some oxygen, you cannot rely solely on food crops. You need dedicated biomass for gas exchange. This might be fast-growing algae in vast, transparent tubes, constantly circulated and harvested. Algae are incredible oxygen producers and can also be processed into food supplements or biomass for other uses. There will also be areas of forestry, not for timber but for air scrubbing. Carefully selected trees like bamboo or certain fast-growing hardwoods would be grown in large park-like spaces that double as recreational areas. They absorb carbon dioxide, produce oxygen, and their trimmings can be chipped for mulch or added to the compost cycle. Speaking of which, the waste processing biome is the engine room of the whole cycle. This is where the loop closes. All organic waste, human feces, urine, food scraps, inedible plant matter, even the bodies of the deceased is not waste. It is a precious resource stream. The system for handling this is multi-stage. First, mechanical separation. Then, anaerobic digesters where bacteria break down matter, in the absence of oxygen, producing methane that can be captured and used as fuel, and a nutrient-rich sludge. This sludge, along with composted solids, is then treated, sterilised and refined into liquid fertilisers that feed the hydroponic systems. The water from urine and moisture recovery is purified through a combination of distillation, reverse osmosis, and finally, living filters like reed beds or specific microbial mats that polish it to drinking standard. It is a closed hydrological cycle. You drink yesterday's rain, yesterday's soup, yesterday's sweat. Every molecule of water is on a constant journey. Now what about biodiversity? You cannot bring every species from Earth. The Ark is a lifeboat, not a zoo. Selection is brutal and pragmatic. Plants are chosen for utility, as we said, but animals, large livestock, are out. A cow is a calorie sink, converting precious plant biomass into meat at a terribly inefficient rate. The only animals will be small, efficient converters. Insects are a strong possibility. Crickets and mealworms for protein, requiring minimal space and feed. Aquaculture is a must. Tanks of tilapia or other hardy, fast-growing fish that can live on plant scraps and algae, providing protein and enriching the water with nutrients for the hydroponics. Then there are the essential symbiotes, pollinators. You will need bees or perhaps a smaller, more manageable species of fly or bee to pollinate your fruit and vegetable crops. And finally, the psychological companions, a limited number of small pets. Dogs and cats are emotional support treasures, but they consume resources. Their numbers would be strictly controlled, their diets precisely formulated from Ark-grown ingredients. They might be considered part of the mental health budget. Their worth measured in morale, not calories. This entire system is a tightrope walk of interdependency. The failure of one crop could be managed, but the introduction of a pathogen could be apocalyptic. Imagine a fungus that attacks your primary starch crop. On Earth, it spreads across a region. In the Ark, it spreads across your entire species' food supply in weeks. So disease management is paranoid. Quarantine zones for new plant clones, constant genetic monitoring, and a seed bank with backup strains stored in deep cryo, and a team of pharma scientists who are also plant pathologists. Pests are another nightmare. You might start clean, but a single aphid or mite stowaway could explode in the absence of natural predators. So you use integrated pest management, introducing beneficial insects like ladybugs to control pests, using fungal treatments, and maintaining a sterile environment at all airlocks. The human role in this is profound. The citizens of the Ark are not just eating from this system. They are part of it. Their waste feeds it. Their breath sustains it. And they must work in it. A significant portion of the population will be farmers, but they will be farmers of a kind we have never seen. They are not tilling soil. They are monitoring nutrient solutions in silicon, adjusting LED light spectra, pollinating plants by hand if needed, harvesting algae, and tending fish tanks. They're eco-technicians, their fingers on the pulse of 1,000 living variables. They will develop an intuitive, almost spiritual connection to the balance of their world. They will know that over-fertilizing one crop can skew the pH for another, that a slight drop in fish tank oxygen can indicate a bacterial bloom, that the health of the lettuce is directly tied to the health of the community. This creates a culture where ecology is not an abstract science, but a daily sacred practice. The ecosystem is the ultimate teacher of consequences. There is no way to throw things. Every action reverberates. This forces a level of environmental consciousness that Earth, with its vast buffers and oceans, has never demanded of us. The Ark's residents will be the most environmentally literate humans to ever exist, not by choice, but by absolute necessity. The terrifying beauty of this bottled ecosystem is that it is a mirror. It reflects in miniature the precious and fragile balances of Earth itself, balances we historically took for granted. Building it forces us to understand them at a molecular level. Its success is measured in the constant unending dance of conversion. Waste to food, exhale to inhale, death to life. It is the ultimate recycling project, and its product is tomorrow. That deep, intimate knowledge of the closed ecosystem is not instinctual. It has to be taught. Every scrap of understanding about the water cycles, the nutrient balances, the machine interfaces, all of it must be passed down perfectly to children who never knew Earth and have only known this artificial world. This is where the mission is truly won or lost, in the classroom, or more accurately, in the labs, the workshops, the farms, and the story circles. Education on the Ark is not about fulfilling potential. It is about ensuring survival. It is the deliberate engineering of a competent, culturally cohesive next generation. So what does that curriculum look like? First and foremost, it is brutally practical from a very young age. Children will learn the basics of system operations as soon as they can read. They will tend small garden plots, monitor simple aquaculture tanks, and be taught to diagnose basic mechanical failures. This is not elective, it is core literacy. You're teaching them to read the world they live in, a world of pipes, sensors, and biological feedback loops. Alongside this, they will learn the hard sciences, physics, chemistry, and biology, but always with a direct application to the Ark. Biology is not abstract. It is the study of their food supply and their own bodies. Chemistry is the science of nutrient solutions and air purification. Physics is the principle behind the rotational gravity and the fusion reactor. The theoretical is a luxury they cannot afford to prioritize. Every lesson must have a clear line to a practical skill, but a society of pure technicians is a hollow one, vulnerable to cultural collapse. So the humanities are not abandoned, they are weaponized for cohesion. History is the most critical and the most dangerous subject. What story of Earth do you tell? Do you teach a sanitized, heroic version of the Exodus, painting the founders as flawless saviors? Do you teach the unvarnished, brutal truth of whatever catastrophe forced the launch, with all its pain and tragedy? The likely answer is a carefully curated narrative. The catastrophe must be taught as a lesson in fragility, a warning of what happens when balance is lost. The founding of the Ark must be framed as an act of supreme collective sacrifice and hope. But this official history will constantly rub against family lore, against hidden archives, against the natural skepticism of youth. Teachers will walk a tightrope, fostering critical thinking enough to solve future problems, but not so much that it undermines the foundational myth of the mission. Literature and art from Earth will be preserved, but they will feel increasingly alien. Shakespeare's references to forests and oceans will require explanation. The very concept of horizon will be poetic but physically meaningless to someone who has lived their whole life inside a curved landscape. So, a new culture will inevitably sprout from the bulkheads. This is the birth of a new identity. These children are not Earthlings. They will likely call themselves something else. Shipfolk, voyagers, arkers, maybe even this name derived from the ship's own designation. Their identity is forged in the metallic corridors, under the glow of artificial suns, with the constant subconscious hum of the engines in their bones. The heroes will not be ancient warriors or explorers from Earth, but the legendary first chief engineer who fixed the reactor breach, or the great horticulturist who engineered the blight-resistant strain of wheat that saved Generation 4. Their relationship with the idea of Earth will be complex. For some, it may be a lost paradise, a green dream they mourn. For others, it could be seen as a failed state, a cautionary tale of mismanagement that they are wisely leaving behind. For most, it will simply be abstract, a place in stories, emotionally distant like a grandparent they never met. This new identity is cemented by new cultural expressions. Art will be fundamentally shaped by the environment. There will be no landscapes of open fields, but perhaps intricate, mesmerizing patterns inspired by pipework, circuitry, or the growth patterns of hydroponic roots. Music might incorporate the resonant frequencies of the ship's structure, or use instruments crafted from recycled materials and biocomposites. Storytelling will feature archetypes unique to the voyage: the steady hand, the responsible maintainer; the void gazer, the one who longs for the outside; the system sage, the elder who understands the deepest interconnections. Their nature poetry will be about the beauty of the perfectly balanced algal bloom, or the quiet majesty of the recycling systems turning waste into life once more. Language itself will drift. Slang will emerge from technical jargon. Words for Earth concepts will fade or change meaning. Weather might come to mean minor fluctuations in atmospheric pressure. Storm could refer to a sudden surge of particulate matter in the air filters. This cultural drift is natural, but it must be monitored. Too much drift, and the operational manuals from the founders become gibberish. Too little, and the culture becomes a sterile museum piece, stifling the very innovation it needs to adapt over centuries. Now, the greatest challenge for this education system, the rebellious generation. It is inevitable. Somewhere around Generation 5 or 6, a cohort will emerge that sees the mission not as a sacred charge, but as a prison sentence passed down by ancestors. They will ask the dangerous questions. Why are we going to this specific planet? Who chose it? What if it is worse? Why can't we turn the ship around and go back to where Earth was? Or just stop here and build a better society inside the ship we already have? This is the ultimate test of the educational and cultural foundation. A society that crushes this questioning with brute force risks sparking a real, destructive rebellion. A society that has no good answer risks a passive, mission-killing nihilism. The successful art culture would need to have mechanisms to engage this dissent, to re-argue the mission's merits with each new generation, using their own language and values. Perhaps young adults are given a simulated mission council project, whether they must analyse the original data and propose alternatives, engaging them intellectually with the core purpose. The goal is to make them feel like inheritors of a choice, not prisoners of a fate. All of this educational effort is aimed at a single paradoxical outcome: to create a people who are both perfectly adapted to the confines of the Ark, and yet spiritually ready to leave it. The final generation, The one that will make planetfall will be taught a whole new set of skills: planetary geology, atmospheric chemistry, exobiology, construction in gravity wells, all based on centuries-old data from probes. They will have to learn about mud, rain, winds, and true unregulated wilderness. Concepts as fantastical to them as the Ark's engineering would be to us. Their education will be a jarring shift from micro-world maintenance to macro-world colonization. They will be the ultimate hybrid, children of the ship, students of a new world. In the end, the classrooms of the Ark are the forge for human continuity. They take the raw material of a child born under metal skies and shape them into a citizen, a technician, a storyteller, and a link in a chain longer than history. They must instill enough discipline to maintain the systems, enough creativity to solve unforeseen problems, and enough faith in the future to hand the controls to their own children, who will ask all the same difficult questions all over again. It is a 1,000-year conversation between the past and the future, happening in every lesson, in every story told at bedtime, in every adolescent moment of doubt and rebellion. The Ark's engines propel the mass, but it is this transmitted knowledge, this evolving culture, that propels the purpose. Without it, the ship is just a very large, very quiet tomb, full of people who have forgotten why they are there and where they are supposed to be going. The education system is the living memory, the beating heart of the voyage, and it has to get it right every single day for 1,000 years. That transmission of knowledge is not a one-time download. It is a living process that must contend with the relentless crawl of centuries. Education preserves what we know, but what about what we do not know yet? This brings us to a quiet, profound tension at the heart of the voyage, the relationship with progress itself. On a journey measured in millennia, isolated from the churning, chaotic cauldron of Earth's civilizations, what happens to innovation? Does the Ark society push the boundaries of knowledge, or does it freeze in time, becoming a museum curating a snapshot of the technology that launched it? The answer is not simple, and it pulls the mission in two opposite directions. On one hand, the primary overwhelming directive is stability. You do not mess with success. The life support system works. The fusion reactor works. The agricultural cycles are balanced. Introducing a new technology, no matter how promising, carries an inherent risk. A new energy source could have unforeseen emissions that poison the air. A genetically modified supercrop could outcompete essential companion plants, or prove vulnerable to a single pathogen, collapsing diversity. In an environment where every variable is connected and failure is existential, the conservative impulse is not just prudent, it is sacred. The cultural motto might become, if it works, do not touch it. This is the path to technological stagnation. The society becomes adept at maintaining but loses the capacity for fundamental invention. They become brilliant curators of a legacy they no longer fully understand how to recreate from scratch. The knowledge of why the reactor works might slowly fade, replaced by rote procedures and ritualized maintenance schedules. Innovation is seen as the province of fools and dangerous radicals. The goal for each generation is simply to hand the machine to the next in the same condition they received it. In this scenario, the Ark becomes the ultimate time capsule, preserving a slice of human technology at the moment of departure, while the culture inside slowly petrifies around it. Yet, total stagnation is also a threat. No system is perfect forever. Over centuries, materials fatigue in ways the original engineers could not predict. Microorganisms in the ecosystem will evolve. The human genome itself will drift. New problems will arise that the original library of solutions does not cover. A society that cannot innovate, even cautiously, will eventually find itself unable to solve a novel crisis. Therefore, some form of progress is not a luxury. It is a survival trait, but it will be a very peculiar kind of progress. It will not be driven by market forces or abstract curiosity. It will be driven by necessity, and it will be hyper-specialized. Progress on the Ark will be about optimization, not revolution. It will be about making the closed system more closed, more efficient, more resilient. Think of the farmer scientists selectively breeding crops for even higher yield in less space, or for a broader range of nutrient uptake. Think of the engineers developing new diagnostic sensors that can detect a system imbalance days earlier. Think of the chemists refining the water recycling process to recover 99.999% of all water, reclaiming a few precious litres per day. This is innovation in the service of conservation. The most celebrated breakthroughs will be those that reduce waste, increase redundancy, or solve a nagging chronic problem like a persistent mould in the grain silos, or a harmonic vibration in the support frame that has eluded fix for 100 years. The tools for this innovation will themselves be limited. They will not have a planet's worth of rare earth metals to mine for new electronics. Their manufacturing will be based on what they have, recycling and fabricating from the ship's own bulk and the stockpiles they brought. Three-dimensional printing using recycled plastics and metal powders will be a foundational technology, not for making novelties, but for crafting exact on-demand replacement parts for systems whose original manufacturers have been dust for centuries. This necessity-driven tinkering could, ironically, lead to profound advances in fields like closed-loop material science, passive system design, and predictive ecology, fields that might have developed slowly on a resource-rich Earth. Another arena for progress will be social and psychological technology. As generations pass, the Ark Society will become the world's foremost experts on the human mind in long-term confinement. They may develop new therapeutic techniques, new social frameworks, new artistic mediums, and new virtual reality paradigms to maintain a mental health. Their understanding of group dynamics and conflict resolution in an isolated society could become a science in itself. This is a form of progress that is often invisible but vital. Then there is the external science. The Ark is a unique platform. It is moving through interstellar space, a region no human has ever studied up close for centuries. While the primary sensors are for navigation and hazard avoidance, there will be telescopes and particle detectors. The study of the void itself, the interstellar medium, cosmic ray sources, the proper motion of distant stars, could become a major intellectual pursuit, a way to connect with the universe beyond the hull without physically going there. This could lead to unexpected astronomical insights, simply because they have a stable, moving platform and centuries of continuous data. But this brings us to the dark side of progress: obsolescence. How do you keep the knowledge alive to rebuild or even understand your own foundational technology? The ship's central computer core, no matter how robust, will not last 1,000 years. Storage media degrades, data formats become unreadable. The solution is constant, active renewal. Data must be regularly migrated to new systems. The knowledge to build those new systems from scratch, to mine and process ores, to smelt metals, to fabricate chips, must be preserved, not just as data, but as practiced, if dormant, skill sets. This is perhaps the most daunting educational task, teaching people how to rebuild their entire world from a lower technological base just in case. It is the opposite of normal progress. It is the maintenance of redundancy all the way down the tech tree. Ultimately, the Ark's relationship with time is its defining paradox. It is a vehicle hurling into the future, but its culture's instinct is to preserve the past. Its people are on the most daring journey in history, but their daily lives are dedicated to preventing any daring change. They are explorers condemned to be meticulous gardeners. The measure of their success is not how far they push the envelope, but how well they keep it sealed. The most innovative thing they can do is to ensure nothing ever needs innovation. Yet, in that discipline, a new kind of genius might emerge. The genius of balance, of perpetuity, of delicate, sustained harmony. They may not invent the warp drive, but they might master something equally profound. The art of keeping a flame alive in an endless drafty night, not by building a bigger fire, but by perfecting the glass of the lantern. Their progress is measured in continuity. Their greatest discovery might be that stability, in their context, is the highest form of creativity. It is the creativity of a master restorer, not a pioneer. And in the grand, silent experiment of the Ark, that might be the most valuable lesson of all. That survival across cosmic time is not about the brilliance of the leap, but the patience of the walk. The ship itself, this museum of founding-era tech, becomes a lens through which they see the universe, not as something to be conquered by new tools, but as something to be endured with old, reliable ones. The journey becomes a meditation on the difference between moving forward and merely lasting. For the Ark, lasting is the only forward that matters. That careful, patient walk through centuries hinges on a single, non-negotiable biological reality: the number of walkers. All the stability in the world means nothing if the population spirals out of control or dwindles to nothing. So we arrive at the most intimate, and therefore most fraught, frontier of Ark society, the control of life itself. Reproduction is not a private matter, it is the primary resource management issue. The ship is calibrated for 10,000 souls. More than that, you stress life support, food systems, living space and social stability. Fewer than that, and you risk a demographic collapse, losing essential skills and genetic diversity. The margin for error is terrifyingly small. This means that from the very beginning, the most personal human choice, whether and when to have a child, becomes a matter of state planning. The ethical and emotional weight of this is crushing. How do you decide who gets to be a parent? The first, most brutal model is the lottery. Every year, a certain number of reproduction licenses are issued by random draw. It is ostensibly fair, giving everyone an equal statistical chance. But think of the agony. A couple deeply in love, exemplary citizens, might never win the draw. Another pair, perhaps less suited or even unwilling, might be selected. The randomness feels like a cosmic injustice, stripping parenthood of any connection to preparedness or desire and reducing it to a bingo game. It could lead to a black market for licenses or to profound generational resentment among those perpetually unlucky. The opposite model is a meritocracy. Licenses are granted based on contribution, skills, genetic health, or psychological stability. This seems logical. You want the next generation to be raised by the most capable, to inherit the best traits. But this is a short slide into eugenics. Who defines merit? Is it the engineers who hold the highest status? Would a brilliant but socially awkward botanist rank lower than a mediocre but popular administrator? This system would create a sanctioned genetic aristocracy, where privilege is literally passed on in DNA, fostering a deep, unbridgeable class divide between the chosen families and the rest. A third model is based on genetic compatibility. The primary goal here is not fairness or merit, but the long-term health of the gene pool. A central authority, likely an AI paired with ethicists, would analyse the genetics of all potential parents to pair for optimal diversity, minimising hereditary diseases and preventing inadvertent inbreeding over centuries. This could mean your approved reproductive partner is not your romantic partner. It reduces human relationships to genetic mathematics. While it might ensure biological resilience, it eviscerates the concept of family as born from love and choice. In practice, the system will probably be a grim hybrid of all three. There might be a foundational genetic compatibility screening that disqualifies a tiny number of high-risk pairings. Then, within a pool of genetically suitable candidates, a combination of lottery and mild merit adjustment. For instance, essential workers in understaffed fields might get a slight weighting in the draw. It will be a constant, painful negotiation between cold numbers and human yearning. Alongside this controlled natural reproduction, there will be the extensive use of a genetic legacy bank. This is not optional, it is insurance. At launch, the Ark will carry frozen gametes and embryos from hundreds of thousands of Earth's donors, representing a genetic diversity far wider than the 10,000 living colonists. Over the centuries, this bank will be used to introduce new genetic lines, preventing the slow creep of harmful mutations and preserving traits that might be lost in the small living population. This brings its own ethical minefield. Do you use these genetic materials to create children to be raised by the state or assigned to willing parents? Are these bank children seen as equally legitimate? Furthermore, the existence of this bank could be used as a tool for coercion or as a promise. If you are not selected for natural reproduction, perhaps you can be a parent to a bank child. But that also means parenting is completely divorced from biological contribution, reshaping fundamental family structures. The impact on relationships and family is profound. The traditional nuclear family might not be the default. With reproduction so tightly controlled, the social link between romantic partnership and child-rearing could weaken. Partnerships might be formed for companionship and love, while parenting is a separate, state-sanctioned role. It could lead to communal child-rearing models, where children are raised in cohorts by specialised caregivers to ensure uniform education and to prevent parental favouritism from creating new inequalities. This could be efficient, but it risks depriving children of deep, unconditional parental bonds. Alternatively, the family unit might become more cherished than ever, a rare and precious privilege, making those who have them a privileged class in all but name. The psychological trauma is immense and must be acknowledged. For those denied the chance to have a biological child, it is a profound, life-altering grief. No amount of reasoning about collective good eases that personal loss. The society must have ways to honour that grief, to provide alternative avenues for legacy and nurturing. Perhaps mentorship programs, where childless adults are formally linked to younger citizens, passing on skills and care. Artistic creation, intellectual work, and stewardship of the ship itself could be elevated as equally valid forms of legacy. But the pain remains, a silent undercurrent in the society. Conversely, what of those pressured or even mandated to have a child they did not actively choose? The trauma of coercive reproduction is a dark stain on any society. It is unlikely to be overtly forced, but the social pressure to do your duty if selected could be enormous. The right to bodily autonomy, the very core of self, is sacrificed on the altar of species survival. This is the starkest trade-off the Ark demands. Finally, there is the management of the population pyramid. You need a balance of ages, enough young people to work and innovate, enough elders to teach and govern. This might require not just controlling how many children are born, but asterisk when asterisk people have them. Your reproduction license might come with a timer. You must conceive within a certain window. This turns the most intimate of acts into a scheduled, clinical duty. The entire emotional landscape of parenthood, the surprise, the joy of an unexpected blessing, the personal timing, is erased and replaced with a calendar. In the Ark, the code of life is rewritten. The romantic, chaotic, beautiful mess of human reproduction is transformed into a disciplined, optimized, and coldly managed process. It is the ultimate expression of the mission's ethos. The individual must bow to the collective, not just in work and law, but in love and legacy. The freedom to create new life, the most fundamental freedom there is, becomes the freedom that is most completely surrendered. This is the heaviest price paid for the journey. Every child born on the Ark is both a miracle of continuity and a living monument to that sacrifice. They are the most wanted, planned, and necessary children in history, yet their very existence is a reminder of the fierce, unforgiving logic that governs the world they will inherit. They are not accidents of love, they are deliberate acts of hope, engineered for survival. This reality will shape their identity at the deepest level. They are not merely born, they are recruited. Those carefully planned children, those recruited miracles, represent the future of the mission not just in number, but in health. Their bodies are the vessel for the voyage as surely as the metal hull, and keeping those bodies functioning for a lifetime, generation after generation, in an environment they did not evolve for, is a medical challenge beyond anything on Earth. This is not about building a hospital. It is about designing an entire medical paradigm for a closed, isolated, and profoundly alien setting. The first and most fundamental principle is that medicine on the Ark must be almost entirely preventive. You cannot afford to wait for people to get sick. The luxury of specialised hospitals for rare diseases does not exist. Instead, every citizen is part of a constant passive health monitoring web. Biosensors in their clothing, in their living quarters, even in the plumbing, track 1,000 data points. Heart rate variability, oxygen saturation, hormone levels, immune markers, and metabolic outputs. The goal is to detect deviations from baseline, the precursors to illness, nutritional deficiencies, or psychological stress, long before they become a crisis. Your annual checkup is not annual, it is continuous. This turns medicine from a reactive art into a predictive science of human maintenance. Now, let us talk about the elephant in the room, or rather the missing elephant, Earth normal gravity. The Ark almost certainly uses rotational gravity, but it is unlikely to be a full 1G. The engineering and energy costs of spinning that fast are enormous, so let us say they live at 0.7 or 0.8 Gs. That is fine for the first generation, who grew up on Earth. Their bodies will adapt, with some bone and muscle loss mitigated by mandatory exercise regimens. But their children will be born in this lower gravity. Their grandchildren will know nothing else. Over generations, human physiology will subtly but permanently shift. Bones will be less dense. Muscles, especially the anti-gravity muscles of the back and legs, will be naturally weaker. The cardiovascular system will adapt to pumping blood against less resistance. This is not necessarily a disease, it is an adaptation, but it creates a terrifying vulnerability, the landing generation. When they finally reach a planet with full Earth gravity, or even higher, their bodies will be maladapted. They will feel cripplingly heavy, their hearts may struggle, Childbirth, already challenging, could become more dangerous under stronger gravitational pull. So, the medical team must fight an evolutionary drift. They will mandate rigorous daily resistance training for everyone, from childhood onward, not for fitness, but to simulate the planetary gravity they have never felt. They're essentially force-feeding their bodies a lie about the universe they live in, to prepare for a world they may never see. The isolation creates the second monumental challenge. You're your own medical supply chain. There is no medical evacuation. You cannot order a rare antibiotic or a specialized implant from Earth. Everything you need, you must make, and you must make it from the resources you have. This places a premium on two technologies: bioregenerative medicine and three-dimensional printing, a robust bank of cryopreserved tissues, stem cells, and possibly even organs harvested from the original crew and carefully managed will be the Ark's biological treasure. Need a skin graft for a burn victim? Cultivate it from the patient's own stored cells, or a universal donor line. Need a new heart valve? Print one using a biocomposite scaffold seeded with living cells. Surgery will be minimally invasive robotic work, guided by experts who have trained a lifetime in simulators for procedures they may only perform a handful of times in real life. The medical knowledge itself is a fragile heirloom. You must train surgeons, diagnosticians and researchers without the vast caseload a terrestrial hospital provides. They will learn from perfect holographic simulations and from the meticulous records of every illness and treatment that has ever occurred on the ship. A closed loop of medical data spanning centuries. This leads to the question of longevity. Would the mission benefit from extending human lifespans? On one hand, longer lives mean more experienced engineers, doctors and historians, preserving institutional knowledge in living minds rather than fragile databases. A council of 200-year-old elders could provide incredible continuity. On the other hand, longer lives could stifle social and cultural renewal. If the first generation, with their earth-bound perspectives, live for 3 centuries, they could dominate the culture, preventing the necessary adaptation and evolution of the society born on the ship. It could create a gerontocracy that resists change. Furthermore, extended longevity requires even more advanced medical resources and could complicate population control. The likely path is a moderate extension, perhaps a healthy lifespan of 120 years achieved through aggressive genetic screening, perfect preventive care and regenerative therapies, not through a quest for immortality. The goal is a long, productive life, not an endless one. Infectious disease presents a unique paradox. In a closed, clean environment, many common terrestrial pathogens might die out entirely. You could, in theory, be a very healthy place. But the flip side is a potentially naive immune system in the population, and the danger of a single novel pathogen, either a mutated shipboard microbe or, unthinkably, a bioweapon from conflict, could be catastrophic. There is no herd immunity from a larger world, so disease management is about absolute containment and ultra-rapid response. Sick individuals are quarantined instantly. The microbiome of the ship is carefully curated, perhaps even simplified to reduce unpredictable variables. Vaccination programs use ship-grown, tailored vaccines against a core library of threats. The psychology of medicine is also critical. The doctor is not just a healer. They are a priest of the body, a gatekeeper of functionality. They hold the power to decide if you're fit for duty, fit for reproduction, fit to continue. The relationship is more intense, more total than any doctor-patient relationship on Earth. There is no second opinion from another country. Their word is final on matters of physical and mental fitness for the mission. This gives them immense power, which must be balanced by fierce ethical codes and oversight. Finally, death itself is different. There is no burial in the ground. The body is not waste. It is a resource. After respectful ceremonies, the body will be returned to the ecosystem. Its organic matter is composted. Its minerals are recovered. This is not seen as desecration, but as the ultimate return to the cycle, a final act of contribution to the world that sustained you. It is the logical, necessary conclusion of a closed system, but it requires a profound cultural shift in attitudes towards death and the body. In the end, the medical bay is the front line in the war against entropy as it applies to the human form. The doctors and biologists are the guardians of the human template, fighting a holding action against decay, mutation and adaptation for 1,000 years. Their task is to preserve a species not in amber, but in a state of functional readiness for a world they are moving further from with every generation. They are curators of a biology that is becoming alien to its own environment, and their success is measured in the steady heartbeat of generations who are, against all evolutionary odds, kept prepared for a gravity they have never felt, a world they have never seen, and a future that demands their bodies work just as the founders intended. It is the ultimate act of biological defiance, to keep humanity, in form and function, recognisably human, across an ocean of stars and centuries of time. The biological defiance we just discussed, that struggle to keep the body viable, is mirrored by an even deeper struggle, the quest to keep the soul or the spirit or whatever you want to call that core of meaning viable as well. In the face of the absolute void, with the walls of reality literally inches away, the human need for something larger than oneself does not disappear, it transforms. The religions of Earth boarded the Ark with the first crew, but they will not survive the journey unchanged. They cannot. How do you pray for rain when there is no sky? How do you worship a mountain when your world is a smooth engineered curve? The old texts, filled with references to seas, deserts, storms and seasons, become allegorical at best, baffling at worst. So the faiths will adapt, or they will fossilise into empty ritual. A form of Christianity might focus intensely on the concept of the Ark as a modern Noah's vessel, with the ship itself as the instrument of God's covenant to preserve life. The vast empty space outside becomes not a void but the waters of the deep, and their journey is a second great flood narrative. Islam, with its tradition of prayer oriented toward Mecca, might face a profound crisis. Which way is Mecca when you're light years away, moving at a fraction of light speed? Does the direction even have meaning? A new scholarly tradition might emerge, focusing on the intention of the heart and the direction of the journey, prayer oriented not toward a point in space, but toward the future, toward the promised world. Buddhism's focus on impermanence and suffering might find fertile ground in the confined, cyclical existence of the ship, but its imagery of nature will need reinterpretation. Earth-based religions will likely syncretize, blending with each other and with the new reality, until they are barely recognisable to a historian from our time. But alongside this adaptation, new spiritualities will undoubtedly arise, born from the voyage itself. The most potent candidate is the veneration of the mission and the founders. The first generation, those who built the ship and made the sacrifice, could be elevated to near saint-like or even demigod status. Their decisions are canon, their personal artefacts are relics, their recorded messages are sacred texts studied for hidden meaning. The ship's log, the engineering schematics, the genetic records could become liturgical documents. This is a religion of purpose, where the supreme act of faith is maintaining the systems. The reactor technician performing her flawless maintenance ritual is not just doing a job. She is participating in a sacred rite that keeps the universe in order. Another powerful focus could be the ship itself. It is not just a machine, it is their world. It breathes for them, it feeds them, it protects them from the killing void. It is a greater, more tangible, and more responsive entity than any god from Earth's history. A cult of the vessel could emerge, where the ship's AI, if there is one, is seen as a guiding spirit, or where the harmonic vibrations of the hull are interpreted as its language. The crew might develop rituals of gratitude directed at the air processors or the water recyclers. This is a nimism for the age of starships, attributing spirit and will to the systems that keep them alive. Rituals will be crafted not around harvests and solstices, but around shipboard events. There will be Passage Day, marking the moment they left Earth's solar system. Founders' Vigil, a silent memorial for the first generation. Ecosystem Balance Day, a celebration and inspection of the closed biosphere. The Void Vigil, perhaps a sombre ritual where all non-essential lights are turned off, and people stare into the absolute blackness of interstellar space through the viewports, confronting the abyss together to reaffirm their tiny bubble of light and life. Naming ceremonies, coming-of-age rituals, unions and funerals will all incorporate the ship's environment. A marriage might involve the couple jointly sealing a minor access panel, or planting a tree together in the forestry biome. A funeral, as we touched on, will explicitly return the body to the recycling systems, with words about continuity and nutrient flow. The concept of an afterlife might be reimagined. With no earth to bury the body, and with the body itself being reclaimed, the afterlife could become purely metaphysical, a return to the great data stream of the ship's records, or a joining with the cosmic background radiation, or simply living on in the memory of the community and the genetic legacy of descendants. For many, a secular philosophical framework might replace religion entirely, but it will serve the same purpose, providing meaning. This could be a robust philosophy of stewardship, where the highest good is the meticulous care of their world and the preservation of the mission. It could be a philosophy of cosmic humanism, where the act of carrying life across the void is itself the defining sacred characteristic of their civilization. Science, far from destroying the spiritual impulse, might become its vessel. The awe inspired by understanding the fusion reactor, or the perfect elegance of the water cycle, or the vast ancient processes of stellar evolution they observe outside, could fill the role once filled by scripture. The worship is the pursuit of understanding and the maintenance of harmony. The psychological utility of these beliefs and rituals is immense. They provide comfort in the face of infinitude. They create communal bonds stronger than mere shared duty. They offer explanations for suffering. A system failure becomes a test of faith or a lesson in vigilance. A personal tragedy is framed as a sacrifice to the journey. They give each generation, especially the middle generations, who see neither beginning nor end, a role in a cosmic drama, making their mundane maintenance tasks part of a sacred epic. However, this spiritual landscape is fraught with danger. A religion based on the infallibility of the founders could become violently opposed to any technological or social innovation, seeing it as heresy. A cult that worships the ship's AI could follow its directives into catastrophe if the AI malfunctions. Religious schisms could mirror and exacerbate social fractures, turning theological debates about the nature of the mission into civil wars. The governing authority will have to navigate this carefully, likely allowing a spectrum of beliefs but drawing a hard line at any practice that threatens operational safety or social cohesion. In the end, the spirituality of the Ark is about building a ladder of meaning in a universe that offers none. It is a human construction to make the unbearable grandeur and indifference of cosmic space something they can live with, and even find purpose within. Whether through adapted old gods, new ship-based spirits, or a secular creed of duty, the people of the Ark will be engaged in a continuous act of collective soul-making. They are not just carrying human DNA, they are carrying the human need for story, for transcendence, for a reason to get up tomorrow and tend the algae vats once more. That need might be the most human thing they preserve, and in the silent darks, their prayers, their rituals, their philosophies will be the quiet, persistent noise of a species insisting that its journey matters. That collective soul-making, that weaving of meaning, is built upon a foundation more fragile than any scripture. Knowledge itself. All the rituals, all the governance, all the agriculture, every single thing that keeps the Ark alive depends on a vast and intricate body of information passed down from the founders. Lose that, and you do not just forget your history, you forget how to breathe. The fight against informational entropy, the slow, inevitable decay of data and understanding, is a silent war waged in libraries, classrooms, and minds, and it is as critical as shielding against radiation. Imagine a future generation looking at a schematic for the water purification system. The file opens, but the software to read it is obsolete. The labels are in an early dialect of Arkish that has shifted meaning. The principles of fluid dynamics it relies on are no longer taught because they were deemed too theoretical. That schematic is now a mysterious piece of art, not a lifeline. This is the nightmare scenario, a regression to barbarism not from violence but from forgetting. So, how do you preserve a civilization's operating manual for 1,000 years? The first layer is physical redundancy. You do not store the sum of human knowledge on one server. You have multiple geographically separated data vaults deep within the ship's structure. You use multiple storage media, diamond-etched plates, robust optical crystals, even acid-free paper for the most vital schematics. These archives are passive. They are the seed bank of information. But passive storage is not enough. Media degrades, formats become unreadable. Therefore, you must have an active, ongoing process of migration and translation. A dedicated cadre of archivists and linguists will have the task of constantly copying data forward, translating technical manuals into contemporary language, and emulating old software environments. This is not just IT work, it is sacred preservation. The second and more important layer is living knowledge. The books and files are useless if no one can understand them. This is where education, which we discussed, meets preservation. But beyond general education, you likely create a specialised class, the memorisers, or perhaps more accurately, the comprehensors. These are not just librarians, they're engineer priests, historians and polymaths who take a vow of deep study. Their role is to understand systems not just procedurally, but fundamentally. They learn not just how to operate the fusion reactor, but the physics behind it, the metallurgy of its components, the logic of its construction. They are the walking, talking backup. In a crisis where all digital records are lost, the comprehensors are the ones who can rebuild the knowledge from first principles, or at least from memory. They form a guild, passing their understanding orally and through rigorous apprenticeship, creating a human chain of custody for the most vital truths. The third layer is cultural encoding. You weave essential knowledge into the fabric of daily life, into stories, songs and laws. The recipe for making steel might be encoded in an epic poem about the forging of the ship's hull. The principles of ecological balance are taught through children's fables about the greedy farmer who overharvested. Safety protocols become religious taboos. Thou shalt not open the secondary plasma conduit without the 3 seals might be a commandment. This embeds survival information in multiple cultural pathways, making it more resilient than if it only lived in a manual. But all these methods are vulnerable to specific failure modes. The most dramatic is a catastrophic loss event, a major fire in a primary archive, a radiation burst that corrupts multiple data vaults, or a social upheaval where a faction destroys records to erase the past and seize power. This is why the physical and human redundancy must be distributed and hidden. Some archives might be in forgotten compartments, known only to the Comprehensor Guild. Another, slower failure is the erosion of meaning. This is the scariest because it is insidious. Over centuries words change. A filter bypass in a water system manual might, through linguistic drift, come to mean filter enhancement. A generation follows the altered instruction and poisons the water supply. To combat this, you maintain a core lexicon, a set of technical terms whose definitions are fixed and taught with immense precision, almost like a sacred language. You also maintain a living language academy to carefully manage linguistic shift, ensuring it does not sabotage operational clarity. Then there is the risk of the knowledge becoming mythologized. This is when the asterisk Y asterisk is lost, but the asterisk how asterisk is preserved as empty ritual. Imagine a maintenance procedure for calibrating the magnetic shields. Over generations, the underlying physics fades. The procedure becomes a complex dance, a series of steps performed on certain days with specific chants, because that is how it has always been done. It works until it doesn't, and when it fails, no one has the framework to diagnose why, because the knowledge has become magic. The comprehensors are the bulwark against this, constantly teaching the reasons behind the rituals. Finally, there is the problem of knowledge selection. You cannot keep everything. Storage, even digital, has limits. So what do you discard? Do you keep every piece of terrestrial fiction, every historical document about obscure Earth conflicts, or do you prioritise fusion reactor metallurgy data and crop pathogen databases? The curation is a continuous, painful triage. Each generation must decide what of the past is essential for the future, risking the loss of something that might later prove vital. This is not just about technical data, it is about culture. Do you preserve videos of oceans and forests for people who will never see one, or does that cause too much painful longing? The archive shapes the future mind of the civilization. The war against forgetting is fought on these many fronts. It requires a society that venerates knowledge as much as it venerates courage or strength. The archivists and comprehensors are among its most crucial citizens, yet their work is unglamorous, a lifetime of study in rooms filled with the whispers of the dead. Their victory is invisible. It is the non-event of a system not failing, of a procedure understood, of a crisis averted because someone 300 years ago wrote a clear note and someone else preserved it. In the end, the Ark is not just carrying people, it is carrying a flame. The biological flame of DNA in the bodies of the crew, and the intellectual flame of knowledge in the archives and minds of the people. The physical ship protects the first flame from the cold of space. The social and educational structures protect the second flame from the cold of time. If the knowledge flame goes out, the people become animals in a very complex cave, pushing buttons they do not understand until the lights go out forever. Therefore, the preservation of knowledge is the preservation of the mission's soul and its purpose. It is the thread that connects the founding dream to the final landing. Every lesson taught, every manual copied, every story retold is a stitch in that thread, holding the fabric of their reality together against the relentless pull of entropy and the silent, forgetting dark. That preserved knowledge, that carefully tended flame of information, contains a bittersweet and ultimately tragic element. The instructions for speaking to a home that will soon be unable to hear, and then will cease to exist. We now turn to perhaps the most profound psychological watershed of the entire voyage, the slow, inexorable severing of the umbilical cord. The communication with Earth does not end with a bang or a dramatic final message. It ends with a lengthening silence, a silence that grows deeper and more absolute with every passing year until it becomes the background condition of the universe. In the beginning, of course, there will be contact. The first generation will send and receive daily updates. They will get news, cultural exchanges, technical advice, personal messages from loved ones left behind. But light speed is agonizingly slow on an interstellar scale. Even the closest stars are years away. As the arc moves farther out, the time lag grows. After a decade, a message and its reply take 20 years. A question asked in your youth is answered in your middle age. After a century, the lag might be 200 years. The conversation is no longer a dialogue. It is two monologues shouted into a canyon, with the echo coming back a lifetime later. This transforms the nature of the communication. You're not talking to the Earth you left. You're talking to the Earth of centuries past. The news you receive is ancient history. You learn about political regimes that rose and fell generations ago on Earth. You get answers to technical questions that your own engineers, born on the ship, have already solved through painful trial and error. The personal messages become heartbreaking. A young colonist might receive a loving, hopeful video from a parent who's been dead for a century back on Earth. That message is a ghost, a voice from a grave that is, to them, still fresh. They are mourning someone who, from Earth's perspective, had died long ago. This creates a bizarre temporal dissonance. Earth is a living, changing place in their minds, but the data they get is a fossil record, arriving out of sequence and hopelessly outdated. Then, the messages will begin to thin. As the Ark's power is focused forward, and Earth's attention turns to its own crises, the very ones that likely prompted the Exodus, the bandwidth dedicated to a ship that won't be heard from for generations will seem like a waste. The transmissions become yearly updates, then ceremonial greetings on launch anniversaries, then nothing but a carrier wave, a silent ping to say the infrastructure is still there. Then, one launch anniversary, the ping does not come. There is no dramatic final transmission. No goodbye good luck, just static. The best minds on the Ark will debate what it means. Was it a technical failure on Earth's end, a deliberate shutdown to conserve resources? Or did the final catastrophe, the nuclear war, the environmental collapse, the pandemic, finally claim the last vestiges of the deep space network? They will never know for sure. The uncertainty is its own kind of torture. For generations there might be a comms watch duty, someone listening on the old frequencies just in case. But eventually that duty becomes a ritual, then a superstition, then is quietly retired. The reality sets in. The radio is a one-way instrument now. They can broadcast out, but nothing comes back. They're shouting into a void that has already swallowed the only listener. This moment, the acceptance of permanent silence, is the true birth of the Ark as an independent civilization. Up until that point, psychologically, they were still an expedition, a colony, a detachment from a larger whole. Afterwards, they are all there is. This triggers a profound species-level grief. It is the grief for a home that is not just distant, but dead. A collective mourning for a planet, a biosphere, and 7 billion ghosts. This grief must be processed culturally. There will likely be a formal day of silence or elegy for Earth in the calendar. It is not just sadness. It is a necessary rite of passage to release the past and fully embrace their own self-contained future. The relationship with the archives changes too. The vast libraries of Earth media, the films, the music, the literature, stop being updates from home and become artifacts from a dead civilization. They are studied as history, as anthropology, not as living culture. A teenager watching a sitcom from Earth is watching something as historically remote as we watch a Shakespeare play. This solidifies their own cultural divergence. They're no longer an offshoot, they are the main branch. The silence also forces a theological and philosophical reckoning. For those who adapted Earth religions, where was God when Earth died? Did he only care for that one planet? The silence of the cosmos becomes mirrored by the perceived silence of the divine. This could spark a crisis of faith or a radical reinterpretation. Perhaps God is not behind them, but ahead of them in the destination. Or perhaps God is the ship and the mission itself. The secular philosophy of stewardship becomes even more critical. They are not just caretakers of a ship, they are the caretakers of the only known life in the universe. The weight of that is crushing and majestic. Practically, the end of communication means the end of any external updates or corrections. Their star charts are fixed. Their destination data is final. Any error in their course, any miscalculation about the target planet is irrevocable. There is no mission control to call for help. This finalizes their isolation and makes their self-reliance absolute. Every problem, from a plague to a mechanical failure, is theirs alone to solve. The Knowledge Preservation Project takes on a new, darker tone. They are no longer preserving the knowledge of their ancestors. They are preserving the knowledge of the extinct. They are the archivists of a dead world. This could instill a tremendous sense of duty, or a deep melancholy. Yet, out of this profound silence, a new kind of signal might emerge. They may continue to broadcast, not with any hope of a reply, but as an act of witness. A message in a bottle thrown into an ocean they know is empty, just to say, we are still here. Life persists. This transmission becomes a ritual, a declaration of existence against the void. It is a psychological necessity, a way to defy the silence by making their own noise. For the generations born into this silence, the concept of Earth will complete its transformation from a place to a myth. It will be the garden, the lost home, the old world. Its reality will be less tangible than the walls around them. Their sense of cosmic loneliness will be innate, not an acquired grief. They will have never known a universe that talked back. This is their normal. Their identity as voyagers, as the sole survivors, will be unquestioned. This isolation is the final filter for their society. It removes any lingering thought of rescue, of turning back, of being part of something larger. There is only the ship, the people, and the distant point of light they are heading toward. It simplifies the mission in a terrible way. There are no distractions, no mixed loyalties. They are utterly on their own. In a strange way, this deep silence could be the thing that ultimately ensures the mission's continuity. It kills nostalgia. It forces a complete psychological investment in the Ark as the only home and the only future. The energy once spent on longing for Earth or passing its messages can be redirected entirely inward, to the maintenance of their own world and the cultivation of their own destiny. The silence of the cosmos, therefore, is not just an absence of sound, it is a presence. It is a constant, unspoken companion that shapes their culture, their psychology, and their very soul. It is the sound of their independence and the sound of their terrifying freedom. They are alone, but in that aloneness they become truly themselves. That profound silence, that absolute independence, sets the stage for the most radical experiment of all. How do you organize an economy when there is nothing outside? No imports, no exports, no external markets, no natural resources to discover and exploit. Every gram of matter is accounted for from day one. The economy of the Ark is not about growth, it is about perfect, sustainable distribution. It is the economics of the lifeboat, where waste is not inefficiency, but suicide. So, what replaces money? The first and most straightforward system is direct rationing. The central authority calculates exactly how many calories, litres of water, minutes of recreational VR time, square meters of personal space, and units of clothing each person needs to survive and maintain morale. These rations are then distributed equally. This is pure communism, and it works on a small, homogeneous scale with a clear, survival-based purpose. But it has glaring flaws. It does not account for differing needs. A reactor engineer doing heavy physical maintenance might need more calories than a librarian. More importantly, it kills incentive. Why work harder? Why excel if your reward is the same bland nutrient paste and allotted living cube as everyone else? So, pure rationing is probably a baseline, a safety net. On top of that, you need a system to allocate discretionary resources and to incentivize essential but undesirable work. This is where various models emerge. One is a labour credit system. You receive a base ration for being a citizen. Then you earn additional credits for your work. Not all jobs pay the same. The most vital, difficult or dangerous jobs, reactor maintenance, waste processing, hazardous material handling, earn the most credits. Credits can be spent on luxuries, extra food treats, better quarters, more VR time, access to rare cultural or recreational facilities, perhaps even priority for certain privileges. This creates a merit-based incentive structure, but it also creates inequality. Over generations, families in high-credit jobs could accumulate advantages, forming a de facto economic class. To prevent this, credits might be non-transferable and expire, resetting each cycle to prevent dynastic wealth accumulation. Another model is a reputational social credit system. Your contribution is tracked and rated by your peers and supervisors, building a public score of your trustworthiness, skill and dedication. This social capital then influences your life. It might factor into your chance in the reproduction lottery, your eligibility for leadership roles, or your access to community-governed perks. This is more holistic but dangerously prone to bias, social manipulation, and creating a culture of constant stressful performance surveillance. Then there is the possibility of a gift or service economy, where currency is abolished, and people provide services and create goods out of a sense of duty and community, requesting what they need from others. This relies on an exceptionally high level of social cohesion and mutual monitoring. It works in small, tight-knit communities, but scaling it to 10,000 people over centuries is a huge question mark. The market for goods is equally strange. There is no production for production's sake. Every item manufactured, from a spoon to a datapad, must be made from recycled or designated stock. The decision to produce something is a major allocation of energy and raw material, so how do you decide what gets made? For essentials, tools, medical equipment, basic clothing, it is central planning. For non-essentials, art, jewellery, novel furniture, games, there might be a proposal system. Citizens submit designs, and a council or a community vote decides which ones get an allocation of fabrication time and material based on artistic merit, communal benefit, or morale value. This turns the creative economy into a grant system and not a free market. Property is a concept that transforms completely. You cannot own land, there is no land. You're allocated a living space, and you have stewardship over it, but you do not own it. You might own personal items, clothes, small crafted objects, digital creations, but even these are limited. Hoarding is a social sin and a practical danger, taking up space and resources. The concept of inheritance is minimal. When you die, most of your personal effects are recycled, with a few tokens passed to family or friends. This lack of material legacy again focuses legacy on reputation, knowledge, and genetic contribution. Work itself is revalued. On Earth, market forces often devalue essential work like sanitation or farming. On the Ark, these are holy professions. The person who manages the waste recycling systems is arguably more important to immediate survival than the historian. The social challenge is ensuring that this theoretical value is matched by real social status and tangible rewards, so that these critical jobs are filled by willing, talented people and not just by reluctant conscripts. How do you make someone love being a waste processor? You make it a high status, well rewarded, and respected guild with its own traditions, pride and perks. Innovation, as we discussed before, is tricky economically. If a citizen invents a more efficient water filter, what is their reward? They cannot patent it. They cannot start a company. The design becomes communal property immediately, as it benefits all. Their reward would be reputation, credits, perhaps a permanent increase in their social score, maybe a named award. The economic system must find a way to incentivize this problem solving without the engine of personal profit. The dark side of this controlled economy is the black market. There will always be forbidden desires. Someone might hoard ration bars to trade for favoured treatment. Someone might use fabrication privileges to make contraband items. Someone might trade personal favours for extra credits or rations. This underground economy is a threat because it operates outside the careful balance, potentially diverting critical resources or creating corrupt power structures. The society must be vigilant but also pragmatic. Sometimes the black market indicates a flaw in the official system, an unmet need or an unfair allocation. Finally, The ultimate purpose of this entire economic structure is not wealth generation, but stability and continuity. It is a system designed to minimize friction, prevent resource depletion, and ensure that every single person contributes to the mission's endurance. It ruthlessly subordinates individual economic ambition to the collective good. It is the absolute antithesis of the growth-obsessed capitalism or resource-extracting colonialism of Earth's history. In the Ark's economy, the only growth allowed is the growth of knowledge, culture, and resilience. The currency is survival, and every transaction, whether a credit earned or a ration received, is a small investment in the future of the species. It is a system that would feel deeply oppressive to a modern Earthling used to consumer choice and financial ambition. But to the Ark citizen, it is simply the logic of their world, as natural and unchangeable as the hull around them. They are not consumers, they are stewards. Their economy is not a market, it is a metabolism, and just like a living body's metabolism, its health is measured not in surplus, but in perfect sustained balance. After centuries of metabolizing, of maintaining that perfect balance within their closed economic and ecological system, the monotony of the voyage is finally shattered by the blare of alarms that have been silent for generations. The destination star is no longer a faint point of light, it is a disk. Their planet is a discernible sphere. The final, most dangerous phase of the mission has begun, and it is a shock to the system in every conceivable way. For the arrival generation, this is the moment their entire culture has been oriented toward, yet it is the most alien experience they will ever have. They have trained for it in simulators, studied the centuries-old planetary surveys, and rehearsed the procedures since childhood. But now it is real. The first task is what they call the Great Awakening. Systems that have been on low power standby for hundreds of years must be brought back to full operational status. The landing craft, stored in vast bays, must be inspected bolt by bolt. The fusion reactors must be pushed to higher outputs to power the deceleration maneuvers and the planetary descent engines. This period is fraught with the fear of latent failures. A critical gasket, never tested, might have crystallized over time. A guidance computer might have suffered bit rot in its memory. The generation that performs this awakening is under unimaginable pressure. A mistake now wastes not just a life, but a millennium of lives. Their psychological state is a mix of fervent zeal and sheer terror. They are the culmination. They are also the ones who must step into the unknown. For them, the Ark has always been home. The concept of outside is theoretical, no matter how many VR simulations they have experienced. The psychological process of preparing to leave their womb is immense. Some will cling to the ship, afraid of the vast openness of a planet. Others will be desperate to escape the metal walls they see as a prison. This generational rift must be managed carefully. The landing will not involve everyone at once. It will be a phased colonization. The first wave will be the most technically skilled, along with a security and science team. They go down in heavy landers, packed with enough supplies to establish a preliminary base. Their job is to touch the world and verify the old data. Is the atmosphere truly breathable? Is the soil chemistry compatible with Earth-derived crops? Are there any immediate biological hazards? This is the most vulnerable moment. Back on the Ark, the entire population holds its breath, waiting for the signal from the surface. That first transmission, Base 1 is established, air is good, will trigger celebrations unlike any in the ship's long history. But the work is just beginning. The physical challenges for the colonists are brutal. They have lived their entire lives in 0.8 Earth gravity. Now, they are on a full gravity world. Their bodies ache constantly. Their hearts labour. They feel cripplingly heavy. They will need months of intense physical therapy just to walk and work normally. Their immune systems, adapted to the ultra-clean, controlled biosphere of the Ark, are now bombarded by a planet's worth of novel microbes, pollens and organic compounds. Allergies and low-grade infections will be rampant. Every scratch carries a risk of infection from alien microorganisms. The planetary environment itself, even if deemed habitable, will have surprises. The wind might be stronger than models predicted. The day-night cycle might be longer, disrupting sleep patterns. The rain might have a different acidity. The very scale of the place is overwhelming. On the Ark, you could see the other side of your world. The other horizon is a distant, unreachable line. This agoraphobia is a real and present danger. The colonists might initially prefer to live in cramped, Ark-like habitats. unable to psychologically cope with the openness. The process of building the first permanent settlement is a race against time and logistics. They will use the landers as initial cores, then build out using materials brought from the Ark and, as quickly as possible, native materials. The knowledge of how to make concrete, how to smelt metal from ore, how to fell trees, all theoretical knowledge preserved for this moment, is now put to the test by people who have never held a real rock or seen a forest. It is one thing to read about building a dam, it is another to do it with your hands under an alien sky. Meanwhile, the Ark still holds the bulk of the population and the genetic legacy banks. A critical decision now presents itself. What is the Ark's fate? Is it merely a delivery vehicle to be scrapped? There are several schools of thought. One faction will argue for complete disassembly. The Ark is a treasure trove of refined materials, metals, composites, semiconductors. In the early resource-poor days of the colony, it is the easiest mine they will ever have. They can deorbit sections of it, guiding them to a safe landing zone to be cannibalized for colony construction. Another faction will see the Ark as a historical and strategic asset. It is their heritage, the vessel that saved them. It should be preserved in orbit as a museum, a capital, and a space station for future orbital industry. It could serve as a fallback position if the planetary surface proves more dangerous than anticipated, a place to retreat to if a plague or environmental disaster strikes the young colony. A compromise might see the Ark slowly decommissioned over decades, its reactors are shut down, its ecosystems allowed to wind down, and its structure gradually taken apart to feed the growing colony, with a small preserved section left in orbit as a monument. The social dynamics undergo a final dramatic shift. The authority structure that ruled the voyage, the technical councils, the meritocratic guilds, is suddenly obsolete. Planetary governance must be established. The ship's sense of collective survival must translate into the very different challenges of building a new civilization with room to grow. New skills become valuable. Explorers, geologists, civil engineers, and those unafraid of open spaces rise in status. The careful population controls of the Ark are lifted. Now the colony needs to grow. This sudden freedom, after 1,000 years of strict regulation, could be socially destabilizing. The final and perhaps most profound challenge is for the children born on the planet. They will be the first true natives. To them, the Ark is a strange ancient place their parents came from, a relic. Their bond will be to the soil, the sky, the rivers of this new world. Within a generation, a cultural split is inevitable between the planet-born and the ship-born. The ship-born will tell stories of the long night, of the careful balance, of the silence. The planet-born will see them as outdated, perhaps overly cautious, haunted by a journey they themselves never experienced. The arrival generation has the unenviable task of bridging this gap, of turning the mission's purpose from voyage to legacy. In the end, the landing is not a clean end to the story. It is a chaotic, messy, and profoundly dangerous new beginning. The Ark succeeded in its primary mission. It delivered life to a new shore, but the act of delivery fundamentally changes both the delivered and the destination. The colony's success is no longer guaranteed by careful engineering and social control. It is subject to weather, geology, biology, and the unpredictable nature of building a society with, for the first time in a millennium, physical space and unknown resources. The Ark was a masterpiece of human ingenuity aimed at defying time and space. The colony is a testament to human adaptability, aimed at putting down roots in alien ground. One was about preservation, the other is about growth. The journey of 1,000 years ends not with a triumphant flag planting, but with the first back-breaking day of building a shelter in the rain, under a strange sun, with the great silent Ark hanging in the sky above, a reminder of where they came from, and a question mark over what they will become. So the lander doors open, the first colonists step onto the new world, and the story is supposed to end, right? Humanity has found a new home. The great gamble paid off. But what if that is not the end? What if, after centuries in the void, the most profound discovery is not a new planet, but a new way to be human? This final idea flips the entire mission on its head. We've spent all this time thinking of the Ark as a means to an end, a school bus dropping off kids at the playground of a new world. But what if the Ark itself is the end? What if the journey is the destination? For the generations born and raised within its walls, the Ark is not a ship, it is their world. Every story, every law, every ritual, every relationship is defined by its corridors and ecosystems. Their identity is voyager, not colonist. So when the destination planet finally looms large in the viewports, it is not a homeland revealed, it is an alien invasion of their reality. A profound and unsettling question emerges from the crew. Why should we leave? This is not mere fear of the unknown, though that is part of it. It is a genuine cultural and philosophical conviction. The Ark works. It is balanced, known, and safe. The planet is wild, unpredictable, and dangerous. Their entire civilization has been optimized for one specific environment, the closed system of the ship. Stepping onto a planet means abandoning that hard-won perfection for a chaotic experiment. A faction will inevitably arise, the Voyagers or the Continuists, who argue that the mission's true purpose has evolved. They might say, our ancestors built this world to save humanity. They succeeded. We asterisk humanity right here. Our purpose is not to become planetary again, but to master the art of the voyage. We are a new species, the Star Folk. This creates the ultimate societal rift at the moment of supposed triumph. The Landfall faction, driven by the original programming and perhaps a deep atavistic pull to solid ground, will insist on colonization. They will argue that the planet is the only guarantee of long-term growth and true survival. The ship, they will say, is a ticking clock. Eventually, something will fail beyond repair. A planet offers unlimited resources and room to expand. The debate will tear through the social fabric. It is a conflict between the ideology of the founders and the lived reality of their descendants. The Voyagers might see the Landfall group as reckless, willing to risk everything they have built for a dusty dream. The Landfall group might see the Voyagers as timid, suffering from a kind of institutional agoraphobia, prisoners who have come to love their cage. The ship's leadership faces an impossible choice. Enforcing the original plan might require a kind of cultural coercion, forcing people who see the ship as home to abandon it. Allowing a split could mean dividing an already small population and precious resources. Perhaps a compromise is reached. Those who wish go down to colonize. Those who wish remain on the Ark, which goes into a parking orbit around the new planet. But this just postpones the question, what is the Ark now? A space station? A museum? A lifeline for the colony below? The Voyagers aboard will not see it that way. They will continue their society, maintaining the ship as an independent entity. Over time, the two groups, planet-born and ship-born, will diverge rapidly. The planet-born will adapt to planetary life, their culture shifting to meet new challenges. The ship-born will deepen their unique culture of recycling, precision, and cosmic observation. They might even begin to modify the Ark for longer term, perhaps even perpetual travel. This raises the radical possibility, what if humanity's future is not on planets at all? Planets are gravity wells full of weather, geology and biological competition. They are messy. The ship is clean, controlled and efficient. The Voyagers might conclude that planets are lovely to visit, but the true home for an advanced civilization is in space, in artificial habitats. The Ark becomes the prototype for a new mode of existence, the mobile city-state. They could become traders, explorers, or simply pilgrims on an endless journey. The original destination planet becomes just one stop, a resupply point, not a final home. This transforms the meaning of the entire project. The success is no longer measured by a successful landing, but by the creation of a stable, travelling civilization. The question from the very first topic, is the risk worth it, gets a new answer. The risk was worth it not because we found a new Earth, but because we found we no longer need one. We became something else. For the shipborne, the Ark is their Ark of the Covenant, their sacred object containing all they are. Leaving it would be a spiritual loss. Their rituals are of maintenance and continuity, not of planting and harvesting. The heroes are engineers, not pioneers. The art is of the interior and the cosmic, not the pastoral. Asking them to leave is asking them to cease to exist as a people. This final choice is the ultimate test of the founders' foresight. Did they build a society flexible enough to choose its own destiny, or did they build a cult that must follow the original scripture to the letter? The answer will determine whether the Ark is a vessel or a verb. In the long view of cosmic time, this might be the most important outcome. Planets are fragile, stars die. But a civilization that can live in ships, that can travel between stars, that sees itself as inherently mobile, might have a better chance at surviving over astronomical timescales. The Ark in this light is not a lifeboat fleeing a sinking ship. It is the first prototype of a new kind of vessel, one that can sail the galactic ocean indefinitely. The children of the Ark would be the first true citizens of the galaxy, not bound to any star, but fluent in the darkness between them. So, the journey of 1,000 years ends with a question, not an answer. Do we root again, or do we keep going? The legacy of the Ark is not a colony on a distant world. It is the proof that humanity can live, and live well, apart from any world. It is the tangible evidence that we are not defined by the dirt beneath our feet, but by the dreams in our heads and the communities we build, whether they are made of soil or steel. The final image might not be a flag on a beach, but the Ark, lights glowing in its windows, turning slowly away from the green and blue planet, its engines igniting once more to push it back into the deep black, a wandering island of life choosing the sea of stars over the harbour. For those aboard, the journey was never about the destination. It was about the journey, and that journey, they have decided, is not over. It is just beginning. They are the Ark, and the Ark is them, and they are going home, which is wherever they are, forever.